Welcome to Diabetes Day by Day, the American Diabetes Association's official podcast. We're now in the new year. The new year brings opportunities and it brings, of course, challenges. It presents a chance to reflect on the past year, how to see how we've grown or how we haven't. And most importantly, it presents an opportunity to move forward, hopefully with thought. Today, we're going to talk about some approaches and some productive hints about how to move forward into the new year. Not so much New Year's resolutions, but rather how to take what we've learned from the past year and move forward, hopefully with our best foot forward. I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik, Professor of Family and Community Medicine in the Sidney Kimmel Medical College of Thomas Jefferson University, and joining me is my co-host.
I'm Dr. Sarah Wettergreen, an assistant professor in the Department of Clinical Pharmacy at the University of Colorado Skaggs School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences. In this role, I practice as an ambulatory care clinical pharmacist at the UC Health Lone Tree Primary Care Clinic. Neil, I'm excited to hear from our guest today.
This is going to be a good discussion, Sarah, and joining us today to share their thoughts and suggestions are Dr. Bob Gabbay and Dr. Bill Polonsky. Dr. Gabbay is the Chief Medical Officer at the American Diabetes Association, and knowing Bob, he thinks constantly, as he always has, about how to help people with diabetes and how to help the American Diabetes Association best meet its core mission of helping people with diabetes. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Neil and Sarah. Excited to be here.
And let me now introduce Dr. Bill Polonsky. Dr. Polonsky is president and co-founder of the Behavioral Diabetes Institute, the world's first organization dedicated to studying and addressing the unmet psychologic needs of people with diabetes. He's also an associate clinical professor in medicine at the University of California in San Diego. Welcome, Bill.
Glad to be here. Nice to see you all.
Sarah, can we start with you? Would you like to share some thoughts about how you're approaching this new year?
I definitely would. So, as you know, Neil, I'm someone who loves the opportunity that comes with a new year. It provides a time to pause and reflect on the previous year, to think about which goals I accomplished and which maybe fell by the wayside. I personally am an avid listener of the Happier podcast. Each year on this podcast, co-host Gretchen Rubin and her sister Elizabeth Kraft create a list of things they want to do during the year, with this year being 23 in 2023. I'm currently finishing creating my list of 23 things for this year, but some of them I've come up with include doing 10 different hikes, reading 23 new books, cooking 23 different recipes, completing 30 straight days of meditation, and more, because I need 23. I've made similar lists for the past few years, and I've had fun talking with friends about what we're each adding to our list and what we're most excited about. I'm not someone who has done well with sticking with more general New Year's resolutions, like exercise more. It seems hard to measure, hard to attain. How do I even know if I've done it consistently or not? So this list of specific things I want to do in the year is especially motivating for me.
Can I ask, Bill, can I throw a question to you? And that idea that Sarah raised of general versus specific goals. Do you have any advice for our listeners on that?
Absolutely. I think the evidence is pretty clear. Anybody who's ever trying to make a positive behavior change, things fail pretty quickly when the goal is too broad. And if you think about probably the most common goal people will say at the time of the new year, which is, gee, I really should lose some weight, which is not actually a behavioral activity. It's a wish. And it's only when you boil that down to, all right, well, what on earth am I actually going to do? What's my first step? How am I going to make this happen? We can get more into the details, but the bottom line is, we know the more specific it is, the more likely it is you're going to be able to be successful.
Isn't that fascinating? So if I wanted to exercise more this coming year, it sounds like I might have that as an objective, but moving into this month, I should probably say something like, I want to walk 10 minutes each day, at least 5 days a week, specific and measurable. Is that correct?
Sure. Although certainly for many of the people I work with, that's going to be overwhelming. My focus would tend to be, what are you going to do tomorrow? Let's really break it down. If you were going to get up tomorrow morning and go for your first walk, Neil, what's going to make that possible for you? What's going to get in that way? And if we discussed it, you might discover, oh, maybe I need to own a pair of shoes I'm going to feel comfortable walking in. So your real goal is, I need to go dig out my old dusty running or walking shoes, or go buy a pair. So it's really that first step, no pun intended, that actually is probably the most critical thing for everybody.
Wow, I've never actually thought about it that way, really breaking down the behavior into each of its components.
Until it's doable, and until we're talking about something that's pretty soon. And I think we all know that. I mean, I think about all the people I've met who'll say, I really do need to start on a diet. I know exactly what diet I'm going to start on. And I'm thinking, maybe a week from next Thursday is a good time to get started. That's not such a great plan. But if I say, what about tomorrow? How's this going to work? And people go, whoa, wait a minute, tomorrow. That's when the rubber's met the road, and you can really begin to look at what's going to make this possible or impossible for you, and how do we work out from there?
Wow. Bob, can I ask you, when you think about, and if I might, first on a personal level and then on an organizational level, how have you approached moving into this new year?
Yeah, so I also love this topic, and I have a series of rituals that I like to do at the end of the year, reflecting on the new year. So I'll just share some of the ones that I do sort of personally. One is just sort of thinking of the accomplishments of the year, and that just sort of gives me a certain sense of like, okay, yeah, whatever happened, but I got some stuff done. So that's a list I do. There's sort of three things. So that's one. The second is I sort of, all my photos that I take over the year, I use my iPhone all over the place, and I travel a lot and stuff like that. I make a little video of all of those, and there are, little programs I use, iMovie or whatever, but it's fun. It's sort of, and now I've got them for several years. And so that's another way to reflect on what were the highlights of the year. And then I do this deeper dive, and essentially a piece of paper, and on one side is positives and the other is negatives. And I look at it. For me, it's easiest to figure what I did through my calendar, but in whatever way, what are the things, a list of things on the positive side that have given me joy over the last year. And that can be professionally, personally, whatever. And then what are the things that gave me these sort of negative emotions over the course of the year? And then after I've done that, what out of that list, because fortunately there's a bunch on the positive, there's fewer on the negative, which I'm happy about. What are the things that, like, what are those things that gave me the most joy? The top 20%, like, that really did it. And those things, and next year I need to plan to do more of that. And those negative things, I need to figure out how to do less of that, whether it's dealing with certain people, certain situations, whatever that might be. And so that helps me to set some of my goals.
Bob, thank you so much for being so honest and personal with that. And that might be the most carefully thought through New Year's ritual I've ever heard. And so many pieces there stand out. The honesty of it, to say, what have I done last year? The ability to appreciate the things that you've done right. The honesty to look at the things that maybe weren't ideal, and then the ability to move toward what you're doing correctly with more certainty. Bill, your thoughts on that approach?
I think it sounds wonderful, but I guess I want to do a shout out to all the people who are not like the high achiever.
Right. Yeah. Right. This is a nerdy activity. Yes.
That I think about so many people I know, whether they're healthcare providers, whether they're people living with diabetes, where at the end of the year you can say, well, I made it. And during the next year, my goal is, well, hope I make it. And we operate from that point. And they might have listened to what Sarah had to say and go, holy moly, there is no way I could even imagine, even listing all 23 things, much as thinking about doing with them. And the idea of focusing on just one single thing when you're trying to spend all of your energy just getting by, making sure your, kids have enough food to eat and no one, you survive the year. I mean, there's a lot we've had to deal with the past few years, right? So I guess I just want to acknowledge that so many of the folks who might be listening to us right now could easily get overwhelmed by the sort of things we're talking about.
That's a really good point, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Yeah, yeah, Sarah. When I heard 23 things, I was trying to think. My goal this year, and this is going to sound a little bit odd, and I have to figure out how to make it specific. One of my goals is to be kinder, and I haven't figured out how I'm going to make it specific and how I'm going to measure it, but I know that's going to be an important thing in my life, and it's what I'm moving toward. Bob, I asked you to go over some personal things. How do you review also organizations move into a new year and hopefully become, particularly for organizations like the American Diabetes Association, become better and better? How do you approach that?
Yeah, so that really is a lot of sort of combination of introspection within the organization, and even more importantly, soliciting from outside people a lot of opinions. And so, uh, we do that in a variety of different ways, through various committees we have and other ways. And then the last little bit, I've started to do something that's been fun, is having a salon event where bring together a bunch of interesting, smart people from different parts of the diabetes ecosystem, people with diabetes, people in industry, people, healthcare professionals, et cetera. And sort of like, if you could really solve the problems of diabetes, what do you think are the big ones and how would you go about doing it? And so all of that gets blended in to, it also happens to be when we do our budget for the coming year. So it helps to inform, all right, out of the monies that we have, that people are wonderful in donating in a variety of different ways, how are we best going to spend our capital to make a difference for people with diabetes?
It's interesting. I'm hearing the idea of asking others, and I'm reflecting now on my goal of kindness. And I think after this podcast, I'm going to talk to my wife as the first piece of input on how I achieve that better. That we have all these lofty goals, and understanding from other people's points of view how we're doing is helpful. Uh, Bill, your thoughts on this topic, how we might approach this?
Well, I'm working on what you can do about being kinder to others, actually. So my thought was, again, this idea of getting very specific is how we get things going, right? And it's the getting things going that's often the hardest part for folks when they're making behavior change. So if you and I were sitting in a room together, although we don't have to, I'd be thinking, well, can you think of one person on this planet Earth who you wish you could be a little kinder to? And that could mean something like, I should just send an email or a text or a phone just to say, you know what, I haven't talked in a while, and I just want you to know I think highly of you, or I love that. And it's no reason you shouldn't be able to think of someone and send that message off in the next 24 hours. And to me, once you get that snowball going, that's where magic happens for all of us.
I love this. I'm walking out of this discussion today with ideas that I had not thought a lot about, and I hope that our listeners feel the same way and take that home to run with. We only have a couple of minutes left. I'm going to ask everyone to just share some thoughts that they'd like to leave our listeners with. Sarah, do you want to go first in terms of thoughts?
Sure. As we wrap up today, I don't want our conversation to be intimidating to anyone who maybe is just trying to make that first goal. As Bill said, getting going can be the hardest part. I read a statistic that said 1 in 4 people quit pursuing their New Year's resolution within the first week of setting their goal. So thinking realistically of, where do I start? What feels achievable right now? And how can I grow from there? And then keep thinking about how you're going to maintain those healthy habits. If things are a challenge, I would encourage people listening to not be afraid to pivot. I think sometimes we set a goal, and if we don't get it that first week and give up, we just say, oh, I'll wait till next year. Maybe next year I'll try again. But New Year can be somewhat of an arbitrary time to start goal setting. So even if you're listening to this, we're past January 1, it's not too late to set a realistic goal for yourself. And think about those ways that work for you in terms of building in the accountability to maintain those habits. Sometimes getting started is hard, but for me, maintaining is also pretty hard. So whether you like habit tracking apps, have an accountability buddy, someone to check in to make sure you're making the progress that you wanted for yourself, any of those strategies that work for you are helpful and can be maintained.
It's so important. And Sarah, as you were saying that so many people don't make it through the first week, I couldn't help but think of something that one of our guests last month, Aaron Sutton, shared, which is that concept: if you're driving along the highway and you get one flat tire, you pull over, you fix the tire, and then you keep moving forward. You don't say, I got one flat tire, I might as well put nails in the other three, and that's it for
Forget the whole
me for
thing,
this trip.
right?
And that failure is a part of success. And if we forget to take our medicines today, we can take them tomorrow. If we don't eat the right things today, tomorrow's another day. And so that's a critically important concept. Bob, any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think we're all under a lot of stress, and so when we think about how we can deal with that, ask yourself what helps you when you deal with stress, and just try to do more of that. And to Bill's point, start it tomorrow.
That's excellent. A few years ago, Bob, I realized that the thing I like doing so much is playing guitar, and I've developed a habit of trying to end just 10 minutes at the end of each day playing guitar. I have so much, I go to sleep so much less stress filled and wake up with more energy from that little investment of enjoyable time. What a great suggestion. Bill, any thoughts you have, final thoughts for our listeners?
I think this will be relevant, or at least related to what Bob was saying, that, one of the things that we have finally learned over the years when we think about diabetes care and diabetes education, where we've been so focused on this idea of behavior change, I think we finally realized it's a mistake, and that it's not behavior change that we should be focusing on. It's really attitude change. That what we see is that when people often put forward this idea of, I should change my behavior, they may not necessarily be interested in changing their behavior. They're ambivalent about it. And I know Bob, like me, has done research on this over the course of years. So if you're approaching this idea of saying, gee, I should read 23 books, or I should be kinder, odds are good that's probably not a good place to start. It's, what would I like to be doing? And do I feel really clear about this? Or if I'm really am mixed about it, maybe that's not the place you should be focusing your energy right now. We need to think more about what that ambivalence is about. So really want to make sure that there's a sense of, this is something I want to do. And ideally something not just that you want to do to better yourself, but we could follow what Bob would say, somehow something that I might even enjoy doing. What a wonderful thing that would be for myself and for all of us. And I wish I played guitar too, so I could do that every night.
Well, I can't think of a better idea to end this podcast on. Bob Gabbay, Bill Polonsky, thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
And Sarah, as always, my co-host, thanks so much.
Of course, I'm happy to be here.
Hopefully for our listeners, this was a useful podcast. I know it was for me. Remember to tune in next month when, for American Heart Month, we'll be talking about diabetes and heart health. For the American Diabetes Association, I'm Dr. Neil Skolnik. Thanks for joining us.